Hello and welcome. This is Pre-Uni New College. This video is intended to provide information about thinking skills and how to solve these questions through strategical steps. These logical explanations and solutions will be beneficial. However, please be advised it does not give all the answers or a shortcut to solve the thinking skills questions. Students must study consistently to achieve successful results. Let's begin the video. Welcome everyone to part 2 of 6 of Critical Thinking Strategy for Thinking Skills. In this video, we'll be covering etc. questions. As mentioned in our previous video, there are 6 types of critical thinking questions. They are assessing the impact of additional evidence, detect reasoning errors, drawing a conclusion, identifying assumptions, matching arguments, and etc. questions, which are questions requiring a combination of strategies to solve the question. We will be covering etc. questions in this video. Let us first look at the general approach method that can be applied when solving thinking skills questions. Firstly, we must read the question. The question line will usually ask for a conclusion based on the information provided. Then, we must read the argument and identify the premises. These premises will often be problem-solving based and may ask you to perform calculations. Then, if necessary, paraphrase the argument in your own words, but usually in the case of etc. questions where it may require a combination of critical thinking approaches, it is best to skip this step due to the risk of confusing the numerical concepts. Lastly, we should eliminate any wrong options that are inconsistent with the premises, i.e., eliminate any options that presents incorrect problem-solving calculations. What are etc. questions? Etc. questions include an array of questions that do not have a specific category. However, one particular type of questioning includes hybrid reasoning questions. Hybrid reasoning questions are questions that require students to utilize a number of skills in order to choose the correct answer. An example could be using problem-solving skills in order to draw a conclusion. In other instances, numerical reasoning may be required in addition to the standard critical thinking skills. If we break down each word of the hybrid reasoning category question, hybrid meaning a thing made by combining two different elements, and reasoning meaning to think about something in a logical and sensible way. Let's look at this example. 100 marbles were split between Marcus and Hunter. Marcus says, "I have 3 times as many marbles than Hunter." This type of question requires some problem-solving skills to obtain a particular conclusion. By first using our problem-solving skills, we can solve this question by dividing the 100 marbles by 4 and deduce the conclusion that Marcus must have 75 marbles and Hunter has 25 marbles. Let's look at this example of a hybrid reasoning question. It says, a teacher writes down the number of points scored by 2 teams in their recent competition out of 100, in correct Roman numerals notations. Team A's starting letter is L, whereas Team B's starting letter is X. Michael says, Team A must have beaten Team B. Jordan says, there is a possibility that the 2 teams could have tied. If the information in the box is true, whose reasoning is correct? A. Michael only, B. Jordan only, C. Both Michael and Jordan, D. Neither Michael nor Jordan. This question is a hybrid reasoning question because it asks us whose reasoning is correct, which is a typical detect reasoning error question, but also requires problem-solving skills and knowledge of Roman numerals to correctly answer this question. Let's use the general approach method to solve this question. The first step is to read the question and determine what it is asking. The question asks us if the information in the box is true, whose reasoning is correct. This tells us that we are looking for a logical correct conclusion that utilizes the correct problem-solving method. Next, we should read the argument and identify the premises and conclusions. The premise is that Team A starting letter is L, whereas Team B starting letter is X. Conclusion 1 is that Team A must have beaten Team B. And conclusion 2 is that there is a possibility that the two teams could have tied. Next, restate the argument only if necessary for you to understand the argument better. Stick as close as possible to the actual text, and in the case of hybrid reasoning questions, make sure not to change the numerical concepts. Step 4 is to predict the answer. Analyze the arguments and try to detect any inconsistencies made based on the information provided. It is best to cross-reference between the argument and the information given. Lastly, we should eliminate any wrong answers. Due to the nature of the question, analyze the premise and use the correct problem-solving methods to eliminate any inconsistent reasoning. The information given to use is that Team A starting letter is L, whereas Team B's starting letter is X. Let's first look at Michael's conclusion that Team A must have beaten Team B. The letter X can be placed before C, XC, to make numbers from 90 to 100. This will always be higher than Team A's number, where the letter L makes Team A's maximum possible number to be 89. Therefore, there is a possibility that Team B could have scored higher than Team A, making Michael's statement incorrect. We should then look at Jordan's statement that there is a possibility that the two teams could have tied. The starting letter L can only represent numbers from 50 to 89. It is noted that the teacher wrote the numbers in correct Roman numeral notation, so there is no instance where they wrote XXXXX to represent 50. Thus, there are no instances where both teams could have tied. Thus, Jordan's statement is also incorrect. Therefore, the correct answer would be option D. Another particular type of questioning from the etc. question category includes identifying the main conclusion questions. These questions ask students to identify the main conclusion that has been discussed in the argument. If we break down each word of the question category, identifying means to recognize or establish as being a particular person or thing. Main meaning chief in size, extent or importance, principal or leading, and conclusion means a judgment or decision reached by reasoning. Therefore, it is important to clearly understand and know what the argument of the question is about in order to correctly choose the main conclusion. You may be wondering what the difference between drawing a conclusion question and identifying the main conclusion question is. While drawing a conclusion question asks students to extrapolate a conclusion from the given information through inferring and using clues, identifying the main conclusion questions requires students to identify the sentence in the argument that is the conclusion. Let's look at a simple example of identifying the main conclusion questions. Students who studied 20 hours a week achieved a higher mark than students who only studied 2 hours. Thus, students who study are able to get higher marks. The main conclusion is the last sentence of the argument. Students who study more are able to get higher marks. We did not have to extrapolate this from a number of premises, but we simply had to identify what the conclusion is in a given argument. Let's look at this example of an identifying the main conclusion question. It says, vegetarian food can be healthier than a traditional diet. Research has shown that vegetarians are less likely to suffer from heart disease and obesity than meat eaters. Concern has been expressed that vegetarians do not get enough protein in their diet, but it has been demonstrated that by selecting foods carefully, vegetarians are able to amply meet their needs in this respect. Which one of the following best expresses the main conclusion of the above argument? A. A vegetarian diet can be better for health than a traditional diet. B. Adequate protein is available from a vegetarian diet. C. A traditional diet is very high in protein. D. A balanced diet is more important for health than any particular food. And E. Vegetarians are unlikely to suffer from heart disease and obesity. This question is an identifying the main conclusion question because it asks us to determine which option best expresses the main conclusion, and the answer options are all direct quotes from the argument. Then let's use the general approach method to correctly identify the main conclusion of the argument. The first step is to read the question and determine what it is asking. The question asks us, which of the following best expresses the main conclusion of the above argument? This tells us that we are looking for a logically correct conclusion already stated in the argument. Next, we should read the argument and identify the premises that would support the conclusion in the argument. Premise 1 is, vegetarians are less likely to suffer from heart disease and obesity than meat eaters. And premise 2 is, a vegetarian diet can contain sufficient protein. Next is to paraphrase and restate the argument, only if necessary for you to understand the argument better. Stick as close as possible to the actual text. In this case, be careful not to reword the stated conclusion and lose the meaning of it. Step 4 is to predict the answer. Analyze the arguments and try to detect what these premises are supporting. Remember that the conclusion can appear anywhere within an argument. Lastly, we should eliminate any wrong answers. Due to the nature of the question, analyze the premise and use the correct problem-solving methods to eliminate any inconsistent conclusions. The premises are supporting the main conclusion that vegetarian food can be healthier than a traditional diet, which is the first sentence of the argument. Option A best expresses the main conclusion. Option B is not the main conclusion, but expresses one of the premises. Option C cannot be the main conclusion because the argument does not explicitly provide this information. Option D is not the main conclusion because it is not explicitly stated in the argument. Option E is not the main conclusion, but it closely expresses one of the premises. Therefore, the correct answer would be option A. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully it has helped you understand a bit about thinking skills and the strategies on how to solve these questions. Please note, as stated in the start of the video, studying and reading consistently are essential for successful outcomes.